What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today we're going to be doing the Plague Doctor guide. So if you've ever been wondering how to play this character, what she excels in and where she's good, etc, then stay tuned. Before we get started, as always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure to check out the description box for Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon. All that stuff has some other awesome stuff going on, and you should check it out. Today's video also has some help from Nick, aka Flagellant's Best Girl, one of my favorite people in the community, who gave me a nice write-up that coincided with my own, so this is a product of both of us together. Since Nick has been so helpful as well, if you've not subscribed to him for all these other crazy Darkest Dungeon exploits, and I don't mean the cheating type of exploits, I mean like soloing the game with Highwayman or beating the game in 6 weeks, then you should go check out his channel. This video will cover all of the normal stuff like strengths, weaknesses, how to play the character, some breakdown of their skills and trinkets, and since I've been wanting to save time making these videos, I'm going to shave some off the back end, so the team suggestion part won't be as long and in-depth. It'll be more of just a general guide type of thing. So let me know if it works for you, and we can keep tweaking it going forward, but that's what we're rolling with today. Starting off with the strengths. What are the strengths of the Plague Doctor, aka Petey, or sometimes Petey-chan, as she'll be called at some point through this video most likely? The strengths of Petey are her immense speed. She gets up to 9 speed at max, which is fantastic. That's one of the fastest in the game. She's one of the best characters in the game at controlling a fight thanks to her stuns. She has access to both damage over time types, so she can do bleed and blight damage. And finally, she has a bunch of other really cool supportive stuff in her kit. She can cure damage over time, as well as give a minor heal to some of your allies, including herself. She can also cure disease at camp, which is fantastic and saves quite a bit of money. And then finally, her entire kit lends itself to a stalling type of playstyle, which in harder difficulties of the game, stalling gets very, I don't want to say necessary, but it gets very helpful, and she contributes to that. All of this coalesces to make Plague Doctor arguably one of the best characters in the game, especially to me. And this will hopefully be evident in the guide by the fact that she can pair up with just about anyone, as well as go to any region in the game and contribute greatly. As good of a character as Plague Doctor is, she does have her weaknesses. The first being she is a dedicated backline unit. She has stuff she can do up front, but honestly she is much better in the back of your party, so rank 3 or 4, that's where she wants to be. So if you're bringing Plague Doctor on your team, that is likely where she's going to be. Her second weakness is that she's one of the most trinket reliant heroes in the game, which means that if you don't get her good stuff early enough, she's not going to feel as powerful as she would. She's incredible in her own right, don't get me wrong, but there is a difference when this character has Blasphemous Vial, which is her orange class trinket, and when she doesn't. Overall, her defenses aren't good. She just has really good speed and control elements, which help her quite a bit, but honestly, her HP, her dodge, her other resists are pretty lacking, so if she's not going first and controlling the battle like she's supposed to, then she's going to get hit sometimes, and she's going to go down pretty quickly. Her final weakness is kind of a personal criticism. It's just that her stun bot potential is so strong, and the way stuns work in this game are so good, that her other playstyles kind of get eclipsed by it. You kind of use the bleed or the heal and the blight and stuff like that to supplement the stuns, because at high level, this character should be stunning constantly. This next section is going to talk about how to play Plague Doctor, so we're going to take the strengths and weaknesses, and then the skills we're going to talk about here in a minute. We're going to combine all that right here and discuss what you should be doing with this character. The first thing to do, and probably no surprise given to what I just said in the previous section, you should be stunning. Literally all of the time. As I said, Plague Doctor has some really cool tools that she can use, but they all fall behind just for the fact that she can stun a bunch of stuff. This means that in the majority of teams running Plague Doctor in the majority of situations, this is the double stun attack that targets the back row of the enemy party. The only time you don't do this is if you have a situation where there's only one backline enemy and then you may not want to stun that one backline enemy, or there is a unit in the back like the Bone Bearer who has immense stun resist, basically stun immunity, so you can't stun it reliably. Other than that, the other fringe cases are like if you get a surprise and you have a high damage party and you can just wipe out the back quickly, then go for that. But outside of those cases, you should be using blinding gas. The reason for this is pretty simple. I know there are people that have been in my comment section before saying, well, if you check the math and stuff like that, you can kill the enemies a turn sooner by opening with Plague Grenade, and sure you can, like that is something you can do. But the reason you open with blinding gas is just because it keeps you safer. The reason behind that idea is because in Darkest Dungeon, you do not want to get hit 4 times in a round if you can help it. So if we're assuming the enemy party is completely full of units, you don't want to get hit 4 times in succession on the opening round. For many of you new players who probably have an issue with stress, So like Cultist Witch or Pelagic Shaman in the back row or Swine Wretch giving you disease. These enemies need to be stunned because sure, you can potentially kill them a turn sooner, but if you're stunning them, you're already taking turns away anyway, and that is the big point. Specifically because sometimes speed rolls either go in your favor or not, and if they're going in your favor, then having more control over the fight is good, and if they're not going in your favor, then being able to stun the enemy every other turn is going to reduce the damage you're taking. The rest of Plague Doctor's kit coincides with being able to stun the enemies multiple times. In between using your stuns, you can do things like Plague Grenade, Incision if you have it, or even use Battlefield Medicine to get some healing on other people. So in that regard, PD is almost a flowchart type of character. You use the other moves in between Blinding Gas, and then once you're out of Blinding Gas targets or charges, then you start using Noxious Blast or Incision depending on what you have. Oh, and of course you heal as needed. Even if you can't find her good trinkets like Blasphemous Vial, or you don't have Color Madness so you can't get Ashen Distillation, the most important thing to give this character is some speed, and after that, everything else is kind of secondary. I'm realizing now this how to play section isn't that deep compared to some of the other heroes, but you know what? Plague Doctor is not that deep of a character because Blinding Gas is such a dominating move. It's kind of weird because the rest of her stuff is a bit more strategic and you have to plan around it and team build and stuff like that, but Blinding Gas is such a broken button that it really takes a lot of the decision making and skill out of this character. Next up, we're going to talk about Plague Doctor's skills, and then her camp skills, and then trinkets, quirks, and then some teammates for her. But we're going to start with these skills specifically. Noxious Blast has some really good accuracy at 115, a solid crit modifier too, and then you have a really good damage over time effect from the blight. But also this has minus accuracy as a debuff. Do not sleep on that minus accuracy. Plague Doctor is a fast enough character, she can stack this 3 times, which means that you can give most enemies minus 21 accuracy unless they have multiple actions or something, and that's actually pretty good. You know, people think of Antiquarian or Man-at-Arms to help with dodge teams, but Plague Doctor actually helps quite a bit herself. Overall, this is a really good move and one of the best on the bar. Next is Plague Grenade. This is commonly rotated with Blinding Gas just because you get this nice combo of cleaving the backline of the enemy team with stuns and then hitting them with damage over time afterwards. And 6 points at max rank is pretty respectable. Most backline enemies are a bit squishier, but when you get into some champion level stuff like Bone Bearer and Virago and Skyver specifically, and Gas to a lesser extent because they do have a lot of HP, but they're blight vulnerable. So against some of these enemies this doesn't do as well, but against others it does, and it's still good to have. So a very easy way to play this character is to just use Blinding Gas, and then Plague Grenade, and then Blinding Gas, and then if you need to, another Plague Grenade, and then after they're all dead, then move on to Noxious Blast, and then maybe Battlefield Medicine if you need to, but it's pretty straightforward. It's almost flowchart. Okay, so this is one of the most broken skills in the game. This is Blinding Gas. It has a very short amount of text, which is kind of funny to look at. So you have 3 shots of battle. That doesn't really matter unless you're in Endless Harvest or a very long boss battle. And then you have 115 accuracy, really good. No damage on it, so it can't crit, which is kind of sad. But then you have 140 stun chance, which is good enough. Plague Doctor gets a lot of stun potential in her trinkets, and then you also have common, I shouldn't say common, but neutral trinkets that give her stun chance as well. So you can get this up to 160, 170, 175 even, or whatever for blight or stun chance, and that is freaking good. But this button right here, this is why you take this character. She has all this other cool stuff she can do, like cure disease, or cure damage over time, or do bleed and blight, clear corpses. There's a lot of stuff in her kit, but this is the reason you take this character. If you do not need Blinding Gas, you are not taking this character. And I'm sure there's some people that don't use it, and they feel like, you know, they're doing fine and stuff, and they probably are. You can still win without it. But honestly, this character is so devastating if you can use this button, that if you are taking her on your teams, you should be using it. Next up is Incision. It doesn't follow the trend of her range attacks with having good accuracy. 105 is passable for a frontline move. It does have a pretty good crit modifier, but this move it's okay. It gets a lot better with Bloody Herb, which we'll talk about in a minute, but on its own, it's still fine. Like if you want to run this in Warrens or put Plague Doctor in rank 3 or something like that, then this is a solid option. Otherwise, there's really nothing to really write home about on this. It hits okay, you know, for damage. It's 7 to 13 at max. That's her base damage. And then has a solid bleed on top of it. It's a good move, but you're not usually going to find a need for this unless you really plan around it. Next is one of my favorite moves. This is Battlefield Medicine. And even though it heals for 3 at max rank, which you may be thinking, okay, that's not a lot, the fact that it cures bleed and blight on the target is also fantastic, but then for some reason, it also cures Plague Doctor as well. So there are some bosses that like to induce a lot of status or damage over time on your party. So Plague Doctor can help mitigate that by healing someone, then cleansing 2 people at the same time. Fantastic. It heals you for a little bit of HP, which gets you off Death's Door. Fantastic. And Bleed and Blight are in every zone in some capacity. So there are either neutral enemies like cultists or bandits or spiders that can do Bleed and Blight respectively, or just every single zone anyway, except for I think the Ruins has access to it, so if you're not counting those neutral enemies. Either way, this move is great. It should be on every Plague Doctor build that can afford it. Next are Emboldening Vapers, aka Buff Vapers. You get bonus damage and bonus speed. These are pretty good for extended fights. These are not useful in hallway or room battles, like most of them. The reason is those battles are just too fast for this to really get a lot of effectiveness. So the only time you really want to pop these is if you are in a extended boss battle where you know Plague Doctor may not be able to do all the other stuff she wants, like you might not be able to stun consistently, or maybe it's the Shambler and you get moved around a lot. So having something to do up front that is still some kind of tempo is nice. And these things, or I should say these Vapers, are kind of weird because you get this nice amount of bonus damage and speed, but it doesn't scale that well as it levels. So really, you could leave this at like level 1 or 2 or whatever for a long time, and then once you're in Champion and you're going to these harder boss battles where you need the damage spike, then you can max it out. But honestly, in most cases, it doesn't feel worth it. This is definitely the worst move on the bar. The final battle ability we can talk about is Disorienting Blast. This is much like Flashbang from Bounty Hunter, if you're familiar with that. So it does a stun, it hits the same rank, so 2, 3, and 4. It clears corpses, which Bounty Hunter can't do, so that's pretty nice. And then it moves the target around. The one thing I don't like about this is I'm pretty sure the way it operates mechanically is, I think it tries to move the character first, and then it gets rid of the corpses after. It's something weird. It's either that way or the inverse of that, which I know sounds silly to say, but seem like it's going to move someone, and then it destroys the corpse, and they just don't go anywhere. So I kind of don't like it for that reason, but it's still a really good stun to have. It's a single target instead of a double target, but it can hit rank 2, which is pretty nice. And it doesn't have a limited use. So if you're against a boss that is vulnerable to stuns, but there's not 2 of them, so you don't have to use Blinding Gas, then you can use this instead. Most of the time when you're playing Plague Doctor, it's either this or Blinding Gas, but there are some times you could run both. Plague Doctor also has some pretty cool camp skills, so if you're not just in it for the battle stuff, you want to look at the camp skills as well, then you should. So with Self-Medicate, she gets bonus accuracy, always helpful, especially if you're early game with no trinkets. Cures Bleed and Blight on herself, fantastic, heals 20% of her life, and removes 10 stress. That is a pretty loaded move for 3 points. Pretty good. So it's okay when you choose to use Self-Medicate that you only get like 2 or 3 of the bonuses. You don't need all 5 that this thing has, but if you can get all 5, then more power to you. But normally, you're looking for maybe 2 or 3 of the bonuses, and it's still worth it. The Cure is a very helpful camp skill, because obviously curing a disease on yourself is fantastic. That saves you upwards of 1,000 gold sometimes, and it's only 1 point. The disease resist for 4 battles doesn't really matter, so don't care too much about that, but the fact that you can cure disease on this character for 1 point is worth using. Leeches are Plague Doctor's best camp skill. This is 15% HP healing, which is cool, but you get to cure someone of disease. I honestly forgot that this thing cures Blight until I looked at it right now. The reason they use this is to cure the disease. It saves money, it cures multiple diseases too, so if they have 2 or 3, you know, you get torn up in the warrens or something like that, then you can get rid of all of them with this one button. Because leeches are such a good skill, it is not a bad idea to let people keep their disease if you're short on money, and then just wait to take them on a mission later on with Plague Doctor so she can cure them. Experimental Vapors is an interesting skill because I think I've only pressed it maybe like 5 times in my entire time of playing Darkest Dungeon, but I always enjoyed every time I use it, just because it's such a powerful effect for only 4 points. Something Nick said in his write-up that I greatly appreciated is that between Battlefield Medicine being really good at preventative measures, so Plague Doctor is a very fast character, which means since she can go before other heroes, she can take their Bleed and Blight off before they, have to deal with it, before they get that damage, so you get a lot of damage prevention there. And something I should have said when I was talking about Battlefield Medicine is that you can cure upwards of 15 points at Champion just because you heal them for 3 and then take off like 12 damage and bleed. That's really awesome. And Experimental Vapors kind of complements that in a way because it lets Plague Doctor act as a healer for the team. So you don't have to worry too much about running Vestal if you have someone like Plague Doctor, because she has really good stuns, so you can slow everything down and then use your minus accuracy debuff on Noxious Blast to bully the front line. And then once you get to camp, if someone is at like half HP, or if you have like a dedicated tank like Man-at-Arms, then you just hit them with this, and they're healed up. It's really good. So you may not press it that often, but honestly, having it is really nice, and the times you do get to use it, it's gonna feel good. Now we're gonna talk about Plague Doctor's trinkets, and we'll start with Witch's Vial. This is just a power crept version of Dazzling Charm, so it's 5 more stun. Amazing. If you find this, use it. Rot Gut Sensor. This is something I feel like I slept on in the past, especially when I made my tier list video for trinkets. This is 8 accuracy at low level, which is very helpful and beneficial. It is flat accuracy, so it applies to incision as well if you decide to use that. And the minus 5% HP doesn't really matter that much. It is 1 HP even at champion, as you can see. So instead of 38, we now have 37. I can just take it off. We're back to 38. So actually a really good trinket. Pretty good until you get other stuff that can supplement accuracy or speed. Disease Derb, you only run this until you find other stuff to replace it. Like if you have really anything else that is worth putting on Plague Doctor, this thing doesn't need to exist anymore. So once you get a few trinkets, like something that gives her speed or some accuracy or Dazzling Charm, Witch's Vial, stuff like that, then Plagued Herb, or I should say Diseased Herb, just never sees the light of day again. You could even probably sell it early on if you want to and not really feel it, but I would still wait until you found other trinkets to replace it, and then once it's replaced, just sell it every time you see it. It's not worth going for, it's not worth keeping, it's not that good. Poisoned Herb is pretty cool. That is a lot of blight chance. That is 40 blight chance, which there are no blight immune enemies in the game except for a couple bosses that I can think of offhand, but otherwise even things like in the Warrens or the Weald that have high blight resist, they're not blight immune. So this can really help you push through that blight resist and stick blights to things that even seem unlikely to blight in the first place. And this 15% max HP penalty is how much? 5. So the way the game rounds numbers, even though you'd assume it's 3 because the rocket sensor was -1, and this is -5, you know, it's 5. So that kind of sucks, but it's still worth using if you need that extra blight chance. Bloody Herb is a ridiculous trinket. It's funny because it makes Incision a really good move instead of just a mediocre move. And if this was on any other character, this thing would be insane. Like if this was a Flagellant trinket, insane. If this was something for Highwayman, so you use Open Vein, insane. But it's on Plague Doctor, so these ridiculous stats are kind of justified because it's only a couple extra damage, and then a lot of bleed chance and some accuracy, which is all nice. So if you want to run Incision, you should have this. Alright, now it's time to talk about the dumbest trinket for this character. When I say dumb, I mean absurdly overpowered. This thing has been nerfed, if you can believe it. It used to be much stronger than it is now, and it's been nerfed since then. And this is the reason that when I talk about Plague Doctor and trinkets and stuff in my videos for bosses and stuff, I say that in most playthroughs, save your early bosses to find something like this. You could save it for Focus Ring or Garlic or something like that, but saving something like Apprentice Necromancer for when this shows up can make Plague Doctor a beast for the rest of your playthrough. The stats are nuts. You get 10 accuracy, which is incredibly helpful. You get 20 to stun and blight chance, which is also amazing. And you see that 25 stress, and you're probably going, well, Shuffle, that's a lot of stress. I don't want to take that much stress, dude. Why would I run this? And my answer to that would be that Plague Doctor is such a fast character that she can either speed tie or go first, like almost on average against a lot of the backline enemies, so that the stress doesn't become a penalty. It doesn't matter if Cultist Witch can hit you for an extra couple points of stress. If you're stunning her, this is another reason we talk about opening with Blinding Gas, so you can stun her, and then someone else on the team does some damage, and then use Plague Grenade, and then she dies next turn. You won't really take as much stress damage as you think by running this, at least from enemy backline units. The only time this really matters for stress is sometimes through like latent crits, or stress cleaves that hit the team, or just hallway stress or hitting a trap. But if you're worried about those things, you can just take the trinket off before a battle and then put it in your inventory, so scouting helps in that regard. But if the trinket's in your inventory and not on the character, you're not taking the bonus stress. Anyway, this trinket is ridiculous. It's the best one she has. You can run it with Bloody Herb if you want to do some kind of dual thing like having Incision plus stuns. It's really good on standard Plague Doctor of Blight and stuns and, you know, support abilities. This thing is just good enough to be on like every Plague Doctor build in the game and still be good, worth your time, and effective. Long story short, this trinket is broken. It's time to talk about the Crimson Court set for PD, so the PDCC, if you will. We have subject 40 notes. These just aren't good. You get 25% bonus HP, which is, I don't know how much, like 5 or 6? 10. JK, that was a lot. But yeah, so 10 HP, pretty good overall, but honestly, you don't get much else out of it. The disease resist doesn't matter, really, because she can cure her own disease, and the way disease resist works in terms of catching disease isn't as good as you would hope. So these just aren't that good outside of running the set bonus. Speaking of the set bonus, we're going to look at dissection kits. So this is a slightly stronger bloody herb. You get a bit more damage and a bit more bleed chance. And it's also flat damage instead of just melee damage, which is pretty interesting. So that means that your grenades, so Plague Grenade and Noxious Blast, will hit like a point harder. I don't know if that matters, but that seems okay, I guess. But if you have the entire set, you get Blight and Stun Chance on top of bleed, damage, and all that stuff. And it looks like really good stuff as a comprehensive package, but you don't get accuracy. And that's the big issue. The reason Bloody Herb is so good for Incision is you get accuracy too. The reason Blasphemous Vial is such a broken trinket, besides the other, you know, extra effects like the Stun and Blight Chance, is you get accuracy. You do not get accuracy in the Crimson Court set. So I would much rather run the Vial and Bloody Herb, which are easier to find. I'd rather run those together than run the Crimson Court set, because you're trading 10 accuracy for 10 HP. Is that worth it? I don't think so, especially with a character like Plague Doctor, who's really good at stunning enemies, so she shouldn't be getting hit because a lot of things are stunned. Strangely enough though, what I will say about the dissection kits is running this with Bloody Herb, actually pretty good. That is okay, but running the subject 40 notes really just doesn't feel good. It's definitely the weakest part of the package. Final trinket to talk about is her farmstead trinket. So this is Ashen Distillation. I think PD used to have higher dodge and they took it away from her. And then when she got this trinket, she got more dodge from it. I think it was to balance around that, but I think that's kind of silly in terms of design. But you get 20 dodge, which is really good. That's quite a lot. And then you get 25% blight skill chance. Fantastic. And then you get healing received with herbs in your inventory. Herbs don't usually go through your inventory very quickly unless you only bring like 1 or 2, or if you go to the cove, sometimes you can burn through them fast. But herbs usually hang around. So that means that outside of, or I should say compared to the other farmstead trinkets where their conditional things are a bit harder to mitigate, like Leper needing bandages, even though he's going to go through bandages pretty quickly, this compared to that is much better. So I do like this a lot. It's pretty cheap. I believe it's 45 shards. So if you have Color of Madness, running the Distillation with something like Blasphemous Vial, very powerful combination. PD is one of the easier characters to quirk for. You really just want speed. So if you can find Quick Reflexes or Luminous, fantastic. On Guard and Quick Draw, both are amazing as well. It's nice to have 2 of these, but honestly you don't need 2. 1 of any of these 4 is sufficient, just because you want Plague Doctor to have the best chance of going first or early in the turn as possible, and all of these help her do that, at least for turn 1. After that, anything defensive like Hard Skin, Steady, Tough, those are all okay. Clotter, really good too. Thick-Blooded, I guess. I wouldn't lock any of those in, besides maybe Hard Skinned and Steady and Tough. Those are all pretty good. Maybe Evasive, or really anything that just boosts her defenses. So anything that gives her Resist, or Dodge, or Protection, or HP, all of those are fine, and Plague Doctor doesn't really need anything else because all of her stuff comes from her trinkets. This last section of the video is going to focus on Plague Doctor teams. She's pretty flexible in what you can put her in, so really she works anywhere with just about everyone. But there are a couple of pretty good specific pairings that I think she does well with. The first one being Flagellant. This is probably one of her best teammates. I don't know what to call this. I don't know if you want to call it like Plague Flagellant or Flagellant Doctor, but I like calling it PDF just because that's all the initials. The 2 of these characters together is really good. They have a lot of synergy. So if you want to run Reclaim with Flagellant, which is the heal over time effect plus bleeding himself, Plague Doctor can cure that and keep him alive. They're both pretty fast, so they can go first before some enemy backlines and stack their damage over time, or Plague Doctor opens with Blinding Gas and then use Rain of Sorrows, and then next turn use Plague Grenade and then use Rain of Sorrows again. That is a lot of damage very quickly on 2 targets. So the combination of these two can get through most enemy backlines in about 3 turns. Meanwhile, they only get to attack once because they were stunned. My second suggestion is a trio. So Plague Doctor, Jester, and Occultist are a very good 3 set of characters to run together. The 3 of them together means you can put whoever up front. You can run Hellion, you can run Leper, you can run Flagellant, you can run Shieldbreak, you can run Crusader, I guess, you could run, I don't know, even Bounty Hunter. There are a lot of characters that go up front with these 3 that these 3 just do a fantastic job of supporting, and together they cover a lot of bases. Between Plague Doctor and Occultist, you have some pretty good healing output between Occultist Heal and Battlefield Medicine. You have stuns all over the place because of Occultist as well as Plague Doctor, and then you have Plague Doctor there in case Occultist does bleed someone, she can patch them up. Then you have Jester, who can supplement everyone with bonus speed and accuracy, which everyone greatly appreciates, extra crit chance as well. And then Jester also benefits your frontline targets. So if you have a Leper or a Hellion, for instance, they really like having Battle Ballad to get extra damage. My point is that overall, these 3 characters together, so Plague Doctor, Jester, and Occultist, offer so much control between the stuns and the speed that it almost doesn't matter who's up front. It's just such a controlling and powerful trio that has access to a lot of recovery, and it's really good. Other than those 2 examples I just listed, like I said, Plague Doctor can really just go into any team. Her ability to provide stuns and 2 different forms of damage over time are welcome everywhere. She has an answer to armor, or I should say protection. She has stuns, which are just devastating. And then she can heal damage over time, which is present in every zone like we talked about before. With all that being said, Plague Doctor is probably up there with Vestal in terms of just drop in wherever and get immediate value. Alright, y'all, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Next up on the Class Guide series is Occultist. So if you want to see some Occultist stuff, keep it tuned here. Then the other characters will come at a later date. I'm trying to finish all these before DD2 drops, so let's see if I can. I'm hoping I can. Let me know what you're thinking down below, especially if you have other things that I missed in the video in terms of strategy, or points and tips and all that, or if you liked or disliked the new format. I'm trying to make things shorter. I did a poll on it. A lot of people said they liked how I was doing it before, but I'm also thinking that I could cut time off somewhere, so I'm deciding to cut it off near the back of the video. Let me know if it works for you. Let me know what you're thinking. And that's it for this one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.